Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate and the House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation and, at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. Indeed, 1 hour after Japanese air squadrons had commenced bombing in the American island of Oahu, the Japanese ambassador to the United States and his colleague delivered to our Secretary of State a formal reply to a recent American message. And while this reply stated that it seemed useless to continue the existing diplomatic negotiations, it contained no threat or hint of war or of armed attack. It will be recorded that the distance of Hawaii from Japan makes it obvious that the attack was deliberately planned many days or even weeks ago. During the intervening time, the Japanese government has deliberately sought to deceive the United States by false statements and expressions of hope for continued peace. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. In addition, American ships have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu. Yesterday, the Japanese government also launched an attack against Malaya. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Hong Kong. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Guam. Last night, Japanese forces attacked the Philippine Islands. Last night, the Japanese attacked Wake Island. And this morning, the Japanese attacked Midway Island. Japan has therefore undertaken a surprise offensive extending throughout the Pacific area. The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. The people of the United States have already formed their opinions and will understand the implications to the very life and safety of our nation. As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for all defense that always will be our whole nation. Remember the character of the onslaught against us, no matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion. The American people, in their righteous might, will win through to absolute victory. I believe that I interpret the will of the Congress and of the people when I assert that we will not only defend ourselves to the uttermost, but will make it very certain that this form of treachery shall never again endanger us. Hostilities exist. There is no blinking at the fact that our people, our territory, and our interests are in grave danger. With confidence in our armed forces, with the understanding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire. .140. How's that?
Too fast.
Too fast?
Yeah.
I remember that day. I had gone to the movies. It was a Sunday. And I was coming back, walking along 82nd Street from the movies, walking back home. It's about 6 blocks. I went to the Roosevelt Theater. I don't remember what I saw. So a lot of excitement on the sidewalks. People talking, I said, what's happening? I said, we declared war on Japan. They attacked. Everyone had heard this. This was over the radio. But I had been in the movies. So when I got home, it was true that everybody knew about it in no time.
So what did you think at that time?
Huh?
What did you think when you heard that on the sidewalk?
I didn't think too much of it. We're going to war. But at the time, let's see now, I was December 7th, 19. I was just 18. So I guess I was going to Queens College as a freshman. did get drafted a year later. Rums got drafted 6 months later. Of course, Japan, I mean, they gave us, they were negotiating, let's see what was the name of the Secretary of State. We had a good Secretary of State. So he was negotiating the joy, try not to go to war. But Japan was a militaristic country that knew that it was going to go to war, was just holding us off with this diplomatic thing while they were getting themselves in position. I mean, it took them about 2 days to get from Japan to get their airline, the ships with the planes.
The carriers.
Carriers, to get their carriers in position. You got to be like 600 miles away from Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor is Hawaiian Islands. It's 3,000 miles from Japan. So they planned it very nicely, and they did tremendous damage. They knocked our whole Navy out. But what they didn't realize is that's a little country. We're 15 times the size. We've got resources. In 1.5 years, and then we have very good people. They put, what's his name? The head of the War Production Board, this Jewish guy, what the heck was his name? I don't know. Very good businessman. Before you know it, he had us producing 1,500 warplanes a day. That's really taking over the whole industrial capacity of the United States. Forget about automobiles, forget about building trains or anything. Everything was to do that. So, and to talk about not only that, but tanks, we put about 1,000 a day. So after about 2 years, Japan, which was doing very well for a while, just like Germany. Well, we also, a few months later, declared war on Hitler. So that's what won all these wars, was our capacity to produce armaments. Germany was winning the war. It was beating France and England until we entered. Once we entered, it wasn't so much the soldiers, it was the armaments and the Air Force. So, you see, the trouble with Hitler was he had a very well-disciplined army, but who was it fighting? It was fighting a bunch of European countries that were, slightly smaller than Germany. It wasn't fighting the United States, which had 10 times the industrial power of Germany. And Germany was spread all over the world.
This is everything you think in hindsight. This isn't what you thought on the sidewalk that
Of
day.
course. On the sidewalk, I didn't pay any. What did I know about history or anything? Going to Queens College, taking poetry. No, you never know it at the time. Like when I was in the Army, I didn't know whether I was going to get out 25 years later. Who knows how long the war's going to last? It could be a 25-year war. So I figured, gee, I could spend my whole life in the Army. Everybody felt the same way.
Yeah.
So they wanted to try to end the war to get back to whatever they were doing. This is a very good speech by Roosevelt, written by his speechwriter. He had a terrific speechwriter, a Jewish guy who had been a Supreme Court judge in New York, and then took the job of speechwriter for Roosevelt. And he made all this stuff, a day that'll live in infamy. You think Roosevelt could figure out all that? This guy was good. In all these speeches, by all these guys, they say, Johnson gave a great speech. He had no speechwriters. I mean, it's not easy to write fancy stuff. But they get some guy who has a PhD in English, and he's been doing it for 25 years, and he knows his stuff. Okay. Take another one. Ready?
Okay. Yep.
The British Eighth Army, whose troops called themselves the Desert Rats, were being driven out of North Africa in the summer of 1942 by the German forces under the inspired command of General Erwin Rommel. The British troops were dispirited. The officers demoralized. The defensive war was being lost. On August 13, 1942, the new commander, Lieutenant General Bernard Law Montgomery, Monty, he was called, gathered his officer corps in Cairo, pointed to a place on the map and stated, "The defense of Egypt lies here at Alamein." The general was sure of himself. He spoke in declarative sentences. He used "I" frequently. "I don't want any doubters in this party." The purpose of the speech was to instill confidence, and he made his point by pointing to it. The great point to remember is that we are going to finish with this chap Rommel once and for all. The staccato style and supremely confident tone of the speech could be emulated by any newly appointed CEO hired to turn around a falling company. It is bombastic, arrogant, but not profane. In this last, his oratory differed from that of American Lieutenant General George S. Patton, who would exhort his soldiers in this way. "You can thank God," said Old Blood and Guts, "that 20 years from now, when you're sitting by the fireside with your grandson on your knee and he asks you what you did in the war, you won't have to shift him to the other knee, cough, and say, 'I shoveled shit in Louisiana.'" The Montgomery style in both military tactics and rhetoric was less earthy and more carefully prepared than Patton's. He uses slang. In promising to hit Rommel and his army for 6, he employed a Britishism for "to vanquish." At El Alamein, Monty launched his counteroffensive after pounding the enemy with the heaviest artillery barrage in military history. His victory was one of the turning points of World War II. 2 years later, in a message to his troops before the Allied invasion in Normandy, he expressed himself in a sentence with the Churchillian sweep. "To us is given the honor of striking a blow for freedom which will live in history. And in the better days that lie ahead, men will speak with pride of our doings." I want first of all to introduce myself to you. You do not know me. I do not know you. But we have got to work together. Therefore, we must understand each other, and we must have confidence each in the other. I have only been here a few hours. From what I have seen and heard since I arrived, I am prepared to say, here and now, that I have confidence in you. We will then work together as a team, and together we will gain the confidence of this great army and go forward to total victory in Africa. I believe that one of the first duties of a commander is to create what I call atmosphere, and in that atmosphere, his staff, subordinate commanders, and troops will live and work and fight. I do not like the general atmosphere I find here. It is an atmosphere of doubt, of looking back to select the next place to which to withdraw, of loss of confidence in our ability to defeat Rommel, of desperate defense measures by reserves in preparing positions in Cairo and the Delta. All that must be created. Let us have a new atmosphere. The defense of Egypt lies here at El Alamein and on the western ridge. What is the use of digging trenches in the Delta? It is quite useless. If we lose this position, we lose Egypt. All the fighting troops now in the Delta must come here at once, and will. Here we will stand and fight. There will be no further withdrawal. I have ordered that all plans and instructions dealing with further withdrawal are to be burned, and at once we will stand and fight here. If we can stay alive, good, then let us stay here, but otherwise we will stay dead. I want to impress on everyone that the bad times are over. Fresh divisions from the UK are now arriving in Egypt together with ample reinforcements for our present divisions. We have 300 to 400 Sherman new tanks coming, and these are actually being unloaded at Suez now. Our mandate from the Prime Minister is to destroy the Axis forces in North Africa. I have seen it written on half a sheet of newspaper, and it will be done. If anyone here thinks it can't be done, let him go at once. I don't want any doubters in this party. It can be done, and it will be done beyond any possibility of doubt. Now I understand that Rommel is expected to attack at any moment. Excellent, let him attack. I would sooner it didn't come for a week. Just give me time to sort things out. If we have 2 weeks to prepare, we will be sitting pretty. Rommel can attack as soon as he likes after that, and I hope he does. Meanwhile, we ourselves will start to plan a great offensive. It will be the beginning of a campaign which will hit Rommel and his army for 6 right out of Africa. But first we must create a reserve corps, mobile and strong, in armor which we will train out of the line. Rommel has always had such a force. In his Africa Corps, which is never used to hold the line, but which is always in reserve, available for striking blows. Therein has been his great strength.
Too tough.
I remember all that. It was on all the headlines in the New York Times, 1942, 1941.
In Africa?
In Africa. See, what happened was, this Rommel had a German army, and he came, Germany is practically right across it's right across at the Suez Canal, right across the Mediterranean. So he came across, mostly through Egypt, and he brought this whole army into North Africa, and he attacked the British, who were pretty weak, and he pushed them back 800 miles to El Alamein, which is about halfway towards Spain on the Mediterranean, but on the African side. And then they sent this guy, and he turned the whole thing around.